Yeah,
No, totally.
hi, Nicholas. It's really nice to be able to talk to you. As I was telling you before, you're sort of semi-famous. You're the Gen Z Moth Twitter guy. So I go on Twitter, I see this guy who's clearly balling out, and I'm like, I have to talk to him. Yeah, thanks so much
We'll
for
call
being
it
here.
that. No, totally. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
The first thing I want to get into is just GZM, right? Because I think GZM is interesting in that it seems like such an unbelievable sort of group to me. There's so much value that's happened to me. There's this collaborative spirit, and people just the focus is on action. And I think any organization where the focus is on action just inherently becomes very exciting. But then there's also this weird duality where Sudarshan talks about literally getting canceled sometimes. And I see people throw shade at GZM. And so I'm just wondering, maybe you could take me back to how you got started with GZM and then how you got your title of
Yeah,
Chief Boomer.
yeah. We'll go into that. I've been in tech for way too long, it seems at this point. But yeah, no, a couple months ago, I don't even know when, it feels like decades ago, Clubhouse became a thing. And during the whole enthralling of the internet being obsessed with Clubhouse, I started tweeting more. It was during COVID. I hadn't had social interaction in months. I was a senior in high school this last semester, but I had one class the whole entire semester. And so I did nothing all day except for work. And so I had no social contact. I was just absolutely bored out of my freaking mind. And Clubhouse appears. And so I hacked my invite. I got on the first night it blew up. I was the 572nd user of Clubhouse or something, which is crazy to think now that it's at like tens of thousands of users or something now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just started hanging out and having dumb conversations with the craziest people. And I thought it was funny. All my friends were really confused because I would post on my Snapchat story. I was talking with Hank Green, and then everyone was like, "Oh my god, thank you! Tell him thank you for teaching me biology." It's just one of those weird moments. And in doing so, some random conversations happened, and we started getting more Gen Zers on the app. It was one thing that I was really focused on doing, and a couple other people were really focused on doing, because at one point I became this Gen Z whisperer. Every time there was a room where someone mentioned someone under the age of 24, there was no one else in the app other than me. And so they're like, "Oh, let's get this 18-year-old kid on the app. He knows stuff." And they just threw me into these rooms. So I was getting pinged 24/7 and getting asked random questions about Gen Z. And it was weird. And so I was just we need more people who can also answer these. And so we started doing it. And Nathan Bashez, who's one of my favorite startup people ever, was in a room with a group of us. And he was like, "We just need a board of directors for Gen Z." And so we did the classic Clubhouse dumb thing to do. And we bought Zoomer.company and put up this board of directors website. It blew up, small, low TAM tech Twitter blew up. And so we created the Zoomer company, and we were just screwing around, and we started making memes, and we did this giant brand drop and all these other things. And everyone's like, "It's a real company. No, it's fake." It was a couple weeks. It was a month and a half after iMouth Eye. And so everyone was super confused. And yeah, and so we all had co-founder and CEO at the Zoomer company in our bios, everywhere. And people just thought it was funny and stupid. And everyone on Clubhouse was inside on the joke. Everyone outside wasn't. We ended up contracting and helping out in a few companies just for fun. They were like, "Oh, we need help with Gen Z stuff." And so we took 2 contracts and just screwed around, and we're helping some companies out. But they were all individually done. The Zoomer company that never officially existed. And so we just rolled that down. But when Gen Z Mafia was created, it was originally this Twitter group chat. And so Carson, Emma, and Suds, and a few other people were the first 6 people in it. And somebody goes, "Oh, we need to add the Zoomer company kids," because we just thought that would be funny. Everyone thought it was a scam. They didn't even think we were going to see. And so suddenly these 2 worlds clashed. It was the weird, almost hard tech, I guess what some people would call people who just really wanted to be in tech. And the group that created the Zoomer company was more the consumer social Gen Z tech kids. Because that was the space I was in previously. And they added us to the group chat, and I started helping organize things. And maybe 20 minutes later, we hit the 60-person limit on Twitter. And then 4 Gen Z Mafia Discord servers were created. And then we had to delete 3 of the servers and get 1 of them functioning. And so overnight, I was helping out with stuff. Met Suds and Nick Donahue, who's the CEO at Atmos. And I had been hanging out when I was at SF, and we were trying to figure out living things. And at one point, this house gets created. So all these weird things slowly start to happen. But yeah, I gave myself the role Chief Boomer a few months ago as a joke,
Mm-hmm.
because when we were adding people, when we were redoing stuff before the New York Times press release. I kept every time Suds was about to tweet something, I'd be like, no, don't say that. Or say it this way, or say something else. Right? It wasn't just Suds, it was like anybody. But I just felt like I was being the angry old guy all the time who was like, you're gonna get us canceled, you're gonna do this dumb thing, don't do this. So the reason I think, this is a little biased, but I think the reason Suds thinks he's uncancelable is because I exist in his life. But that's fine. He won't tell you that. No, not actually. But so yeah, there was this whole period where I was just like, no, don't do that, don't do this. This is crazy. Someone was like, we should start an uprising and take over VC. And I was like, this is dumb. Like, why are we giving anybody any resources to do anything? Obviously, it wasn't all me, and there was so much other stuff going on, but it was just funny. And so at one point, I decided to I at one point put like Chief Boomer in my bio, and just has continued. Because the whole joke was that the Zoomer company, everyone was like the Chief Zoomer at ZoomerCo. And so I was like, Gen Z Mafia, I'm definitely the Chief Boomer. Because no boomers are actually allowed on the server, right? Or actually allowed on the server. But
right.
Yeah, and so I just fell into that. It's been a good time. I continue to rough stuff up every once in a while, but for the most part, everything's been pretty chill, and it's crazy. We're at like 3,500 active members, but 3,500 members, and a few hundred of them are active every week, and I think over 1,600 are active every month. And so it's just been crazy to just build this community up around the people around us. And it's living with some of the people that like started this, or being around them a lot. Emma doesn't live with us, but she's over at the house in SF a lot. It's pretty insane. Like, we sit around the couch and we'll be reading Twitter, and someone like has Gen Z Mafia in their bio, and we're like, wow, that's weird. Because like it was this Twitter group chat that we started. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought about that. It was so funny. I saw Chief Boomer. I'm like, all right, maybe this guy's 23 or something. I don't know what a boomer would be for GZM.
I'm actually the youngest out of like the founding group and that house by far. I'm 18, so definitely got the whole crew beat, which is like where the irony comes into play.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because I was going to ask you, it's so... You've activated so many people in such a short amount of time, right? Because then you had 60 or so people in that Twitter group chat. And now I talk to people all the time, definitely noticing the GZM thing. I guess that's just the bubble that I end up being in Twitter just by virtue of following people like you. But just noticing a lot of people with Gen Z Moth in their bio, and also just random people. I've had conversations with people for this thing, and they mentioned to me that they're in Gen Z Mafia, and I'm just like, holy cow.
Yeah. Oh, we've heard stories of like people, investors that we know at board meetings this past quarter, like bringing up Gen Z Mafia and asking for intros, which blows my mind and should not be the case, but it's ridiculous. So it's the littlest things. But at the end of the day, like, I think Gen Z Mafia has come down to this brand, and like beyond anything else, yes, we're a community, but I think now we're more an ecosystem, and we're something that has like a movement, and or not maybe a movement, but some magnitude in some direction. There's velocity, and that velocity like is really able to drag people who like think they're even thinking about tech into tech. We're providing spaces for people to talk about these things and do this other stuff. I think that's what's really magical about it. Like, and I mean, I take absolutely zero credit for the fact Gen Z Mafia exists. I've just been so grateful for the fact that there is even a community like that, and that we were able to do it so fast. And I'm so thankful that I could go help and do that. And it's the work of dozens of people that make it happen. And I think a few of us have become the face for it. We had 3 photos in an article for the New York Times. It's just crazy to think that behind those people, it really took like a whole entire village to continue, and still now it is continuing to keep Gen Z Mafia going. And we have a bumpy road. Like, life's insane, the world's crazy, and when you go from 60 to 3,000 people over the course of a few months, and you're not expecting it, you want a small group chat, and like suddenly you have this giant movement underneath you. It's interesting. We hit crossroads. I mean, if you were in the server the other day, like you saw that we had a hour and a half long kind of just town hall talking about all those small things that are happening and how we can create the community to be more open and a little more diverse, and not making sure we don't have this like echo chamber, which I think is super duper important. But yeah.
Right. It's not just, I think it's a very specific kind of person that's attracted to it.
For sure. I think it's more like I feel like it's more like an inner mantra, right? Like, and I think there's some dangers to it. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, it's time to build. It's kind of become the mantra behind us. It's more of a meme than like an entire seriousness. But I think we as a generation have this need to go do something. And to be fair, I don't think the way we're doing it is 100% correct. It's very easy to pick up the same tool constantly. But what I think is really exciting is like we have so many channels that just sit around and discuss the efficacy of things, right? Can we do this? How do we do this? And then, okay, let's say we want to start like solve climate change this month. Is starting a company the way to do that? Do we have to just get rid of government? There's these like crazy questions and topics that we have to start asking ourselves. It's about answering the right questions. But I think like the real thing with Gen Z Mafia that's really beautiful is we've created an open space where people can, ask questions and just try things. And it's really for a lot of like young people, right? Because I think our average age, we need to do a good census, but I think our average age is like 18, 19. It skews fairly young. We're like opening people up to this idea of having a sandbox mode. Like most of them are finishing high school, about to be in college or are in college. And college is a little bit less of the case, but like the one thing I'm beyond grateful for is like recognizing the sandbox mode that I had in high school. Me and my friends started a company in middle school, and we were entirely able to do that and have a great time and make it this insane learning experience because we didn't have anything to worry about. And like when you have that opportunity and you have the resources that you can draw from, that's super powerful. And like one thing we're focused on with Gen Z Mafia is maintaining that sandbox mode for people, but just on the other end, right? Like it's not rather than like having to help someone with their worry about having a place to live, having food, whatever else, which is generally this weird founder struggle. A lot of us will tell you about it for a short period before you actually get funding. Like you have 2 months of personal runway or else you're dead, like basically. And I know it's not the case for everybody, but like for a lot of people, they have the ability to just go try whatever they want when they're in that space. And then on the other side, like Gen Z Mafia really, I think at the end of the day, we really want to be a resource for people to, collaborate with people, come up with new stuff and have the resources to try things. And what's really beautiful is that the ecosystem of tools that are being built, right? Like one of my favorites is, if you haven't talked to him, Johnny Dallas, one of my favorite people. Johnny was like super early on Gen Z Mafia, runs this company called Zeet.co, and they're like trying to fix the DevOps problem, right? Like it's so hard for new and young engineers to get into DevOps. Deploying your first project takes forever. And it's one of the things that like I've watched kill young engineers when they're trying for the first time and they hit this roadblock. The great ones overcome it immediately, right? They'll literally starve themselves until they figure out how to deploy something. But like for a lot of people, it's just not the case. And to allow this next generation of builders, right? No code's really beautiful because it lets people who maybe aren't meant for coding build stuff. DevOps is something we need to fix. And like Zeet is amazing, and the thing that he built and it's so fantastic. But like Gen Z Mafia, both as a platform and as members, like basically piloted Zeet as a product. And like on top of that, Johnny's been super chill about giving people like free server space if necessary. When someone's like, hey, I want to launch this, I'll be making money in 2 months. He's been super chill about going out and being like, yeah, sure. Here you go. I'll walk you through it. Like, let's deploy this thing together. A number of things he's helped me on, like writing freaking Docker files for like insane systems. Like he'll just sit down with me for an hour and chat. And I think that's the real beauty of it. Like Gen Z Mafia is not only telling people that they have this opportunity, but providing them with this network that happens to be creating the resources they need to do it. And when you look at it like that, it's this really beautiful kind of living, almost organism-like thing, rather than just this like community of people who are shitposting all the time. Which I think there's beauty in each side. That's always a good time.
Right. Yeah. There's obviously that's the image for the server.
There's so much stuff, right? It's hard to maintain. I'll tell you that. Like there's been long nights, but the beauty of it's just like what I think keeps everyone who's trying to help it going. And I think the really nice thing that we found is when you have something that's important, that the haters or whatever you want to call them, they're like willing to help. There are so many people who are like in my DMs who are like, hey, like this thing happened. Can we like chat about it? Also, I think here's a good way you can fix it so it doesn't happen again. And as long as we're like keeping up with that, it's amazing. I feel like people, I think obviously there are things that have gone wrong and we're trying to deal with that, but there's just, it's really beautiful that like we found something that people who like have issues with us still want and want to make better. I think that's like, super duper beautiful.
Yeah. I think this whole space of community building is really interesting right now. Obviously there's the lack of social interaction. When I spoke to Justin Murphy, he presented this idea of reality entrepreneurs. So he said reality is up for grabs, and then we can literally create a new type of reality. And I think GZM has done that for a lot of people in a sense, right? If your reality is you live at home and you're just with your parents and your friends that live in your local area, that's a very different reality than having the freedom to have people all over the world help
For
you with
sure.
whatever project you're working on. So I think in that sense, it's been really empowering. But what's also interesting is so you're still 18. So you're not in college?
I'm building my own college. Yeah.
Okay, so
Next
what's
do-it-yourself university, as I've jokingly been calling it recently.
Mhm.
But yeah,
So, so you're 18, so you're from Atlanta, right? So you graduate from high school, so you're a senior in high school.
so I graduated in May, so class of
March
2020.
13th happens. You probably have
Yes.
a virtual graduation.
I didn't even get one of those actually. I had an in-person graduation, but it was the Friday after I flew out to SF, and they didn't tell us about it until the Friday before. So I was like, as I'm getting on a plane flying to San Francisco, I get an email that's, hey, by the way, your graduation's next Friday. And I was like, not happening. So I'll
Oh,
chill. Yeah.
why did you end up going to SF?
Honestly, it was like in the middle of everything. Why not be in that one place where there's just enough people? I was working on a project at the time and decided to go live out with the team for a bit in SF. And I think like at the end of the day, there's still the serendipity there. As much as everyone wants to say SF's moving, it's just not the case.
Hmm.
There's hundreds of young people flocking to that city right now, and there continue to will be. The news story of SF is being revived by young people isn't as fun. It's like SF's dying. It makes a much better headline. I don't think people want to talk about that. It's not controversial. It's not the contrarian take. The number of people him alone is helping move out to San Francisco is insane, and like the number of just like next semester houses. I have a couple of friends who are like at Georgia Tech who are all like taking next semester off. They've submitted their leave for the semester and
Hmm.
are getting a house apartment together in SF. Like I think across the street from the Atmos house, the Atmosphere, we're looking at a place there. And so it's insane. You hear all about this. It's all on Twitter. It's the Texodus is happening. And then you're like, okay, if we actually look at it, I'm convinced that we're going to be there for a while. SF isn't the place I want to end up. I've been also like torn between SF and LA recently. Like it's part of me trying to figure out if I want to go back or continue to stay in like more of a consumer space. I think SF really has a lot of this beauty. Like no matter what, I'll be straddling the two. And yeah, I was just like, I'm supposed to be going out at end of May, and I pushed it back till June. So like June 20th, I think I flew out. And
Wow. So
just like
yeah,
doing it.
I think, right. SF's definitely not perfect. There's definitely issues there, but yeah, it's interesting when you see on Twitter people talking about maybe Austin or Miami, and it's always very surprising to me because I definitely noticed more of the counter narrative where even I myself, right, was thinking about moving to SF and then tapping into that and realizing that there's literally
Yeah.
so many other people just in my personal network who felt the same way. Um,
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the beauty of it is the serendipity. Like, I joke about it, it's not entirely serious, but I think during a non-COVID world, you can walk out to the street of SF and yell that you're starting a company and probably get a 10K check. Like, literally walk into the middle of any street. You run into so many people. I think Ryan Hoover has a Twitter thread from like years ago about someone walking up to him in a Phil's coffee shop pitching a product that he invested in and ends up like trending on Product Hunt, getting the rest of its investment. He was like, it's the magic of SF. It might not have been Ryan, but it was definitely somebody has this Twitter thread. It's like, and I think like during COVID, yeah, it's not the same. But gosh, the number of people I've been on walks with or like random picnics in the park, like it's ridiculous. So you create this environment
mhm.
where it's just like totally doable. And I think as the group moves, sure. And you can have serendipity online, but there's really this magic to being together. Like the number of things that happen just like in our living room because we're in a place having a conversation is fantastic. I think all of these things can move on. I think it's totally doable. But I don't think like Keith Raboy moving to Miami is enough force to pull the whole entire,
Right,
concept of Silicon Valley to the
right.
other coast. Most it's gonna SF will be the incubator for young people getting into tech and then graduate onto this online place where you can be wherever you want.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a series of interesting shifts going on right now with people talking about the remote work decade. And it's particularly interesting to me to see how people can work around their life instead of the other way around. But part of the thing I'm interested in is that I'm interested in people that are disengaged from this linear narrative of you go to college and then you get a job and you get a 9 to 5 and you
Yeah.
retire at 65 or something like that. And so I'm just interested in how it sounds like you obviously got into tech pretty early, right? You're a year younger than I am, and already doing some pretty cool things. But also, I'm just wondering I think anyone that's interested in technology has this sort of magical moment where they just find something particularly cool. And for a lot of people, that's like sci-fi or video games or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested in what inspires you the most about technology, and also, I guess, the story of how you got involved while you were still in high school.
Yeah. So, I mean, do we go backwards or do we go forwards? I mean, we'll go. I'll answer your second question first. So I was really into space when I was little. Not that I remember much of it, but I think I went into kindergarten or like halfway through first grade. I read every book about space in both my school and public library because I just was so into it as a kid. And yeah, it was like this thing that just absolutely fascinated me. It was like this. I think so many tech people are just insanely into space, and I never really lost touch with it. I think space is still the most amazing thing, and there's so many fantastic things about it. But what really got me into tech was when I was 8 or 9, like NASA open sourced their mission control software. And I was like, this is interesting. And I started like reading an article, and I like go to the code base. I don't think it was hosted on GitHub at the time. I think they were still using their own like weird Git system. NASA's now since moved over to an enterprise version of GitHub. But yeah, I was like, I don't know how to read this, so I'm going to figure it out. Because like I think I was interested in technology as a kid, more physically. Like I would take things apart and put them together. Your classic like young engineer story. But yeah, I was like, what is this? I don't know. So I started teaching myself to code. I forgot about the whole mission control thing. I just like randomly fell into like the whirlpool of being an engineer. I did that, got into some web stuff, did some freelance like web design for one of my parents' like friends during 6th grade. And then during the end of 7th grade, me and one of my friends, Coleman Oates, who's like also in GZM and starting to tweet more, we both really wanted to be in our broadcast program, which was for 8th grade only. But people who are notorious for making ourselves in charge of something, even though we probably shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. So we quickly pulled a few strings with like just the right people to let us participate in the broadcast program in the mornings at school. And at the end of the semester, they were like, hey, we want to do a full broadcast class your 8th grade year. And the first semester, we made sure we were both in it. And in the second semester, we not only got in the beginning, even though we weren't supposed to, but we got into that both of our like elective classes were in broadcasting. And so for one period, we actually did the class, but not really. And for the second period, we just had a free period during the day. Mm-hmm. And so we like stumbled upon Product Hunt at the end of 7th grade year, and we were like, this is interesting. We want to do this. And so we learned about startups and launched this company called Ease. Ease was this SMS-based personal assistant. We like started working on it about 8 months before Facebook announced M, which was their hybrid intelligent assistant that they later shut down. And we just screwed around for 18 months building this thing. We launched it, had a few thousand people on our wait list, had a few dozen users like full-time using it, and almost 130 who were like using it every once in a while. And it was just a phone number you could text and ask it to do anything. And we started to automate it. And we came up with this thesis for hybrid intelligence before it was this, trend in 2013, 2014 that we knew about. We were like, oh, we're going to high school. We're bored. This is dumb. But during that whole time period, like 7th going into 8th grade, I like realized that I didn't like school in a way that I was like willing to pay attention to it. So I was like, how do I like get through this? And I think it all started with this one day where we were 7th grade. We're in this room. My friend Townsend's sitting next to me. And actually, he wasn't sitting next to me. One of my other friends was next to me. But he was like confused about what the teacher was teaching. And so I'm explaining to him. And this teacher gets like really mad at me. She had that classic, do you remember the like tablets that weren't actually tablets, but they would write on the whiteboard? They're weird, like, they were like all white. They didn't actually have any screen on them, but they had a little pen and like it would like write on the screen. Yeah. Like you couldn't see it. Yeah. It was like tablets before iPads existed. And she had one of those and was walking around the classroom lecturing. And she hears me whispering to him, explaining, and because everyone in the class was super confused, and I got it. Pre-calc, math was my thing. Beyond pre-calc, I'm like, whatever, it's dumb. But so yeah, we're like sitting in 8th grade math, or we were taking 8th grade math, so it's like advanced math, and we're all chilling out, and I'm explaining to this kid, and she gets really mad. She's, do you want to teach? Mm-hmm. And like jokingly gestures to hand her tablet to me, and I just take it and start teaching the class. And she's like pissed just enough that she's going to wait on me for like 2 minutes just to see what happens. And 35 seconds in, the whole entire class erupts and oh my God, I get it now. Like you just hear the sound of the room change as everyone's brain just click.
Mm-hmm.
And she hated me for the rest of the year. It was a great time. And I totally forget this story until a few years later where my friend Townsend and I were like randomly texting. He's like, do you remember this day in Miss Smith's class?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, this is like my most notable memory of you. Is you just like suddenly doing this. And he was like, then after that, you like refused to pay attention to that class. You like aced all the tests and just would like work on other things at your desk.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, interesting. And like, I realized later on that this was like during this whole period of this moment where I was like, I need to be in school because it's this thing. It is this linear path people expect. And I want to experience it. But at the same time, like, how do I get out of it? And so I did that a little bit. And then going into high school, they were like, no, I tried so many loopholes. And they were like, no, you can't really do that. But they were like, oh, you're really smart, though. I didn't get forced into all AP classes, but like I did in a way. It was like, you should be an AP student. And I was like, okay, I guess. Like, that's cool. So the summer before high school, after we like kind of sunset ease, I get brought onto this digital agency. I'm like, I want to do some work over the summer. So I'm 14, 15 at the time. No, 14 at the time. Yeah, 14 at the time. And I was chatting with some people. They were running a Kickstarter to start this like all young kind of digital platform for almost like Etsy. And during the summer, we like shifted to this digital agency. And during this whole shift, someone goes, oh, you're no longer like senior full stack engineer. We think you should just try being our COO. And so little me, who has like coded and been obsessed with the space, suddenly becomes head of operations for a company that is like at the time 6 people. Over the course of 2 years, scaled to 30 people. And I just figured it out. And so it was this really cool experience where like I built a company and then I like ran a company. But while doing that, I like also was trying to be an AP student, which I guess in retrospect, horrible idea. Don't do that.
Right.
If anyone's listening and you're thinking about also running a 30-person company while trying to be an AP student, pick one. I said with the company, but if you're listening to me, you probably shouldn't be listening to me. You already know your answer. But yeah, so like burnout was insane. I cannot stress how horrible the end of sophomore year was. And so like during all of this, during this whole period of just insanity, there's some reorg happening in the company. I step back and I like go to the school and I'm like, okay, what can we do where I can do basically not whatever I want. That's not how I worded it. But basically it was like whatever I want to graduate because my parents would not let me drop out. There's no way. But they're like, so I ended up choosing dual enrollment, which is this like really cool program we have in Georgia. And I know a lot of other states have it as well, where I got to go to college for my credits and also like still take high school classes if I wanted to. And junior year, I took 2 classes at the high school and like 4 at college each semester, which meant I had 3.5 hours of school time every day compared to 7. And senior year, I took 1 class at the high school and 1 at the college and found some more loopholes, which is definitely going to be fun to talk about in a minute. And so for me, it was just like, okay, now how do I fill this time with whatever I can do? And so I worked at a VC firm for a little bit and started just doing experiments and testing on stuff and like fully embracing the sandbox mode that I had for the last 2 years in high school. And for me, like I started taking this like really deep look on what education was. Education is something I've been passionate about. I was so into helping unlock my peers' potential and got into that a lot more. And I think education is this game that we play, and it is a linear mode, as you called it. I don't think it's entirely linear, but it's very much this. I would generally refer to it as a religious or a religion in a way, or almost cultic. There's just a set of rules that we go by. You like rank up in the rules, and it's kind of this like game of society that we have. Education is almost the backbone of the society thing. And as I started to realize that, I was like, how low can I go? And then start to drift off, but like still maintain the status of this old game that I was playing and start to create my own new game. And I was one of those, I was very engineering minded as a child. I found loopholes within reason. And so I somehow fell into the trap of doing that for school as well. So my senior year, like second day of school, they call me in and they're like, okay, so you're taking 2 classes, the superintendent's office called, you need to take 4. And I was like, no. And they're like, but you can't graduate unless you take 4. And I was like, I already have over the maximum number of credits I need to graduate. What are you doing? They're like, we have this 1 class you have to take next semester, and you can only, even finish this semester if you take 4 classes. And so I was like, whatever. So like, you need to take 2 more classes. And I was like, so what are 2 classes I can take that I don't have to be here for? And they're like, internship. Can you get an internship? And I was like, I like run a company. So I was working on some stuff at the time, and they were like, oh, do you have somebody you report to? And I was like, well, as the CEO, I report to a board that includes only me.
Oh
And they
my
were like,
gosh.
Interesting. Yes. I got to sign all of my paperwork for both semesters of high school, grading myself for 2 credit hours per class. I had random like personal advisors sign stuff every once in a while when they really asked for it, but somehow the superintendent's office let it slide. And then about 4 weeks into school, I got invited to go to the Forbes Summit with one of my like personal mentors. So I go to the Forbes 30 Summit in Detroit last fall, just over a year ago, and I go into the school and I was like, okay, so like I'm not going to be at school for this whole entire week. Can we excuse it somehow? Is there a way to do this? And someone who I knew, who was one of the vice principals who like knew me fairly well to do stuff for the school, was like, okay, so technically, if it's for a class, you have 7 days of in-class field trips that you can take up to 20 something days per semester. So they're like, so you have 14 days technically out of each semester that you can like just excuse. And they're like, and since it's internship, like you just need to get your teacher to confirm that it was you. And they're like, all they'll want is a letter of you thanking the company for inviting you on this event, and then the company saying that you were actually there. So I got to write a letter to myself, thanking myself for inviting me to Detroit, and then wrote a letter to the school, thanking the school for letting me go. And if that's not the biggest life hack I've ever pulled off, I don't know what is. But it's like, it's all about these little things. It's as you like start to recognize the linear path, you recognize the game, and you like see the rules, you can like also start to recognize, when you recognize where the rules are flawed, you also like know how to exploit them, and you can start creating your own games on top of them. And I think that's the really magical thing out of all of it is, and this concept of creating realities. I love what Dustin has to say about all of that too. Like he's absolutely brilliant, right on it. I push more to the real superpower you can truly unlock for yourself is being able to break out of reality. Because we talk about this a lot in history, like as a concept, but I mean, it's even more apparent in the present. We just refuse to recognize it. It's one man's perspective is everyone else's reality, right? There are, in most cases, like history is defined by the person who won, who wrote the story. There's enough cases of this, but like the present is defined by the people who like say anything that is considered fact and truth. And so when you can break out of that reality, when you can create your own rules, and when you can start to recognize why you were doing something and push yourself in a different direction, or just be able to, see in yourself that like you're doing this rather than that. And maybe you should just be trying that. It's like we pick up the same tools over and over again. It's why I've become really obsessed with this concept of being a generalist rather than an engineer. I'm like writing a whole Twitter thread about it right now. It's so easy to go back to the same thing over and over again. And if you can like create the reality for yourself, right? So like for me, in like creating my own college, I was looking at like, what are the things people even consider college? What is this construct? And then like, how do I provide myself the same benefit, like in all ways long-term? So that's what I've spent the last few months doing and starting on that journey. And yeah, and I think it's just like technology gives us the tools to do that. I think that's why I'm so fascinated by it. I think tech as this like term kind of what we're talking about is just, I think it's bloated. I think everything is technology at this point. We live in the 21st century, for God's sake. Like we talk about it as this thing that's like full of technological wonder, but you don't realize that like everything is technology. When we talk about technology, we're talking about complex systems. That's just the basis of it. And if you can understand those complex systems and you can start to build things, it's the reason why we have modern psychology companies held in the same regard as Facebook, right? It's because everything is technology. There's no pure definition of it. I think that's like the beauty of it is as we as people begin to understand things, begin to recognize the natural law, we can build on top of that. And we can build systems that give people better incentives, move them to do things, or just like create benefit to their life in some way. That's why technology is super beautiful.
I think that's a very important thing about how we can align incentives in a way that allow individuals to make the most of their experiences. Specifically like you did. Eric Thornburg has a series of tweets and then also write his Substack articles about unbundling college. And so you certainly got the making friends part down and living away from home. I think you're regardless.
I don't even think those are the making friends. Maybe I'm in the process of writing a blog post on it, but I've After talking to a ton of people who are in the education space, the like neo-education space, and just like sitting on it for myself, like college is made out of these four pillars, right? We have education, certification, community, and networking. And like those are like the four focal things. And I think, Eric talks about that a little bit. But I think the real thing about unbundling college isn't like creating new college, which is like one thing I like in a way disagree on some of the things that he said. But like unbundling college is creating new education systems. And by that, I mean like new games, right? Like we were talking about earlier, these new mini religions you build for yourself so that you can solve better and greater challenges. Like what we forget is that the education system as it is now is built to produce only scholars and manual labor. That's it, right? Like you either are a scholar or you work in manual labor. And everyone else who doesn't fit in those two categories are people who like fell off the track and started a new one. They were at an interchange and they went off.
Yeah. Like
that's what university is meant for, and that's what high school is meant for. That's what like the public education system in the United States is meant for. And if you look at those games, it's like, how can you create games that make you something or solve new problems? And I think a lot of it's asking the right questions and pushing yourself forward. It's also how do you put yourself through like the tough experiences? And it's why some new colleges are like super powerful. Right? Olin is this insane engineering university. It's so project focused. But even Georgia Tech has some interesting programs. Innovate is the startup program at GT, or whatever it is.
CreateX.
But they have CreateX, and where you're just put in the pits. Like you just have to go for it. And they force you to do something. So like, this is why looking back, I realized the best learning experiences where I just gave, when I had the ability to, gave all safety up and was like, okay, like how do I start a company? And I was like, okay, how do I run a company? And like someone's, hey, like you're now in charge. I'm going to take it and I'm going to run with it. Obviously in the best of my ability where I'm not screwing anyone else over. But when someone was like, hey, you should like try being CEO. Like we're 6 people right now. I just see what happens. Like, you seem good at ops, even though you know nothing about it. Let's just try. And I tried. And I was helping out at VC for a little bit. And they were like, for me, it was like, okay, what does investment even look like? Like when someone comes to me with 5 companies, how do I pick which one is the best? And then also messing up on it. I was in Atlanta, like helping out at a VC firm in SF. And there's one call that doesn't still bug me, but they were just talking with the person I was talking to, the partner at the firm was like, oh, hey, here's a few companies we're thinking about that we've talked to this week. What are your thoughts on this and this? And I was like really excited about one of them because I'd used it recently. And I knew about the other one, but I was like, I think it's a cool product, but I don't see the long-term value in it. Mm-hmm. And like 4 months ago, I finally saw the long-term value in it. Right? It was like a 1.5 year, 2-year learning experience where I was like, this is the end goal I wanted them to be at, but I just didn't see it 18 months ago.
Yeah.
I'm not like, whatever, I can't do anything about it, but it's just like, when you have those things, when you have those experiences that aren't handed to you, like education is so much about like almost, I don't know why handing things to you, right? Like there's core things you have to work for, but like you get told stuff. You have a book, you have these other things, you have these experiences where there's obviously end goal, something you have to discover. That's cool. Like the real gems are the ones where like something happens and you have to create an answer for yourself. You have to understand what you did wrong. You have to put yourself in a retrospective. There are learning experiences where there's like all these holes missing, right? They're almost like fables or like parables where they make no sense until everything just clicks and suddenly you've like found this lesson that stays with you forever. Mm-hmm. That's what's super important. I think that's what the future of education as a whole is. It's how do we discover things for ourselves? A really good friend and like mentor of mine, David Holtz, wrote this thread a couple of weeks ago that was about how we learn physics from a young age by like playing with a basketball or like a soccer ball. We see this arch that occurs, and suddenly when we're like 15 and 16 and we're in a physics class or even in middle school, someone draws this curve on a board and you're like, oh my God, basketball, right? What are the tools? What are the games? What are the toys that we're going to create where like the next generation just by nature of playing understands creating galaxies? You know what I mean? The core fundamental understanding that we have of our universe is like gifted to a child in the form of a round object. So it's like, what are kids going to be playing with 20 years from now? And what can you create for yourself to play with now that teaches you these fundamentals that you'll never understand without that like first interaction with, which I just think is crazy. That's what education is. It's about taking someone from their like their playful state and unlocking, an understanding of the universe in their brain that's so pure and just natural. And continuing to do that over and over again is just where we like really create a next generation of people who can solve the world's problems.
Yeah, that's super cool. I pull moments out of every interview. And so I just made a little mental note to pull that one out there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think when I spoke to Justin, he talked about a similar thing where he talked about why he left academia. And it said it was because he was pursuing what he called the true intellectual life. And the true intellectual life is this sort of internal feeling that I think you're talking about there. It's this wonder. It's when something clicks. It's when you read a really good book or when you're writing something and it starts to, the pieces come together for you. But yeah, I think this idea of creation, that's if you read most people that have created something, that's what Paul Graham advocates. If you have no idea what you want to do, just try to create something around it and you'll inherently understand if you like it or not. So I think the idea that action comes before any sort of inspiration or understanding is a core idea. But I also think, right, when we're thinking about education, when we're thinking about someone handing something to us, I had at a certain point, school can start to feel like a series of arbitrary hoops that someone's laid out for you to jump through. And so I think the thing that I struggle with, which I think is the flip side of people handing things to you, is that but the system inherently can make demands on your time that you don't necessarily agree with. And so I think that's the flip side of not being able to create these gems for yourself, is that you feel like you don't have control just because you are being taught to, as you said, be a scholar or be an employee somewhere.
Yeah. I think the thing there is, I think it seems like the logical thing for so many people to do is drop out, leave the system, stop letting it take your time. I was literally having a conversation with one of my friends the other day. We were having coffee, like she's 16, she's a junior. She was like, I'm just so tired of this. Like I can't do what I want. I want the freedom. Mm-hmm. But I think like the thing is to be able to recognize the inherent beauty of the environment you're in, like one, and then two, figure out ways that you can have freedom in that. Like dropping out isn't like the key. Paul Graham has this quote where he was like, someone asked him if they should drop out, and he was like, if you're asking me, the answer is no. Right? If you think me saying yes is the reason you should drop out, then if you should drop out is no. Mm-hmm. I think that's a thing. So if you are like at terms with yourself enough, which I think most people are by the time they're ready to escape the linearness of it right now, then yeah, go for it. Like you'll have this like feeling inside of you where it's time to let go and float adrift in the void, or away from this nice road that like seems to be paved before you. But I think other than that, it's like, can you create the spaces in which you can do the things you want? Like with that, it's people just don't realize the opportunity that they have in front of them. There's so many insane programs and insane places. If you want to do college, like by all means go do it. And there's so many cool places you can go do it. If like the traditional college isn't your answer and you want something crazy, like there are crazy universities that have gotten certified to give you a degree as well as letting you do crazy stuff. Like I said, Olin's one, the Minerva Institute in San Francisco as well. They're had the base in SF, but I mean Minerva lets kids like travel all over the country or all over the world during their 4 years of college, and it's all about complex systems and thinking about new things in new ways. And there's so many young universities and young people thinking about this, and I can't talk about a lot of it, but I've talked to so many people recently who are working in education, who are thinking about these things in so many new ways. Like there are going to be opportunities to fix this. And so I think the thing is like you just have to find how you create an environment for you where you can do those things, right? How can you create a world inside of your reality right now? How can you start to bend it? It's almost like it's a good Doctor Strange moment, right? It's like, how do you provide this fractal where you can walk through the walls that you think are there or whatever else. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You don't have to commit to a reality or create a new one. Like you can start to work them, which I just think is so beautiful.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, and this is what Justin told me too, he said, I think there's a thing uniquely going on in the 21st century where if you go into this constructed reality, right, hard enough with enough passion, sort of understanding what you're doing, and that reality could be GZM, it could be something that you've created, then it literally starts to feed back onto reality itself, our physical reality. And I think that's one avenue to, like you said, warp your reality and find some freedom there. But yeah, 16 is a bit early to drop out, I think.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I don't think that's what you're saying either, but it's just like, what can I do that creates those things?
Right. So
Yeah.
the last question I always ask people during these interviews, and you've answered it already, but it's what excites you the most about the future, whether that's something in your own life or just something about the direction in which you think the world is moving.
Give me 2 seconds. Just pushing my next call 10 minutes. No, gosh, what excites me about the future or the world? Honestly, like, I will continue to be a Gen Z advocate 24/7. I think our generation's cool as shit. And I think we've grown up in a very unique situation, and people will fight me on it all day long, but we grew up, the majority of us have grown up entirely on the internet. Maybe not just Gen Z, but our generation and all subsequent generations have this like inherent ability to understand natural law, and we don't realize it. We haven't fully, embraced it yet. But we have this understanding of how the world works and how social interaction connects us and how we can make things move. We are a generation of meme lords and change makers, right? Which I just think is this like crazy thing. And it's just absolutely inspiring to watch people come together and be like, I want to do this and make it happen. And how swiftly it gets done. And I think as we start to organize ourselves more and we start to work together to just spread these tool sets that each of us have and share them with one another, the things we're going to be able to do are way crazier. And so I think that if we can make that happen, if we can teach this generation or the next to truly embrace the world in this unique way and use this like deep understanding of these like first principles of the reality that we exist in and the reality that we want to make, I think we're unstoppable. And I think someone said that about every generation, sure, but I think what we are as an just this living, breathing movement, right? Gen Z has started to stand for so many insane things on both sides. Like, we are young and politically active on all issues, and on all issues on both sides of the aisle. Like, people want change and they want things a certain way, and the fact that we can come together and just make things happen is insane. Like, it's just so beautiful, and I think it proves that we're going to be able to do some cool stuff. Someone just tweeted that like 2020 was the year of Gen Z, and I'm hoping next year is even more the year of Gen Z than this one. So we'll see how it goes.
Me too. Yeah, me too. And right, certainly I think it's definitely conversations with people who excite me about that potential that make me the most hopeful for the future. So I really appreciate you making the time to talk to me. And it's definitely something that I'm going to take away from this and think about and hopefully write about, is just this idea of what does it mean to create our own reality, and what does it mean when, right, this generation of meme lords and change makers who actually understands these first principles of the computer age gets a hold of the reins.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks so much. And yeah, again, I really appreciate it. And yeah, take care.
For sure. Have a good one.
Take care.